think that one of the things that we can't be as clinicians too, quick to do is dispose of our own culture. And we have to know that our own culture impacts upon our experiences. It will impact upon even the very language that we use. It will impact upon, absolutely, there's nothing that it doesn't impact upon. So it therefore means that there's always going to be a dose of us with what we give to our clients. And I think for as long as you can appreciate that, it's you're almost a foot ahead.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Listening Podcast. Today we are really excited to meet with Michelle. Michelle is a specialist community public health nurse and children's safeguarding advisor. It's a very long title, that's why I messed it up. So we're just going to be talking to Michelle just about her journey and her experiences, and we hope you enjoy it.
So let's start by finding out a bit about you, Michelle. So who is Michelle?
Who is Michelle? Michelle is, and I think I've been asked this question before, and I think it depends on what day and time you catch me on. But today, Michelle is a woman of balance, a woman of peace, a woman that is navigating a terrain that's very challenging at the moment. She's balancing many things, hats. She's a wife, a mother, a daughter, a sister, a friend, a counselor. She's a coach. She's new in a very new, she's new into a profession that perhaps, is needing people like us in, Black, African, Caribbean children are disproportionately represented when it comes to poverty, when it comes to representation within the children's social care system, when it comes to deprivation and so many things. And people like me need to, children like what I was need to look and see women like me. And this is where I'm at now.
There's so much there, isn't it? Like there's so many things that you've mentioned that we could go on to discuss in so much depth. One thing that sort of stood out to me is what you were saying about the children in the system need to be able to see people that are like them and look like them. Like, can you tell us a bit more about that? Like, what have you seen? Like, what have you noticed that has happened when, you see children and they see that they're like you?
I've been a specialist community public health nurse now. I'm working as a health visitor for the last 8 years, and I've always worked with demographics where there are challenges. In fact, I don't know that there is ever a demographic that doesn't pose challenges. Amongst clinicians, I think the challenges are relative to different people, but we know that the challenges exist. One of the things working within inner city London I've noticed is that the children that I look after and the children that I care for are just like mine. So it means that if there's an insufficiency within parents or between parents or with caregivers of children, it means that those very deficits are likely to be within me as well. And it challenges us to think about what actually separates us from the people that we care for, the people, the children that we try to help, essentially. Once upon a time, I used to be the mother that presented her child for speech and language block therapy. That was me. I was the mother that went to clinic to see, how much her baby was weighing, to see if the food that I was giving her was appropriate. And then to be on the other side is a privilege, and I consider it a liberty to be able to make deposits and to be able to make impact upon the lives of these children. Again, it goes back to the fact that these children, for me, could be mine. if we're open and we're honest and, want to have those very clear conversations, these children are, these children could be ours. And these are the things that these are the things that I've noticed along the journey, that nothing separates my children from these children. Children at the very core want to be responded to and to be loved and to be, to grow and achieve their very own potential. And that's exactly the same as my kids.
And it was here that unfortunately we had some technical issues and lost Michelle from the recording, but thankfully she was able to rejoin us. So this is the rest of the conversation.
When we say that things are disproportionate between like people of color or children of color, really, as well as like between them and their Caucasian counterparts or even like Asian counterparts, is there consideration given for, like, I don't know, for other things other than just like, do you understand, like just not taking the situation at face value, but looking at all the cultural. Oh, sorry, Michelle's back. Question. Yeah.
Sorry. I think,
it's right.
just to come in on the end there, I think that one of the things that we can't be as clinicians to, quick to do is dispose of our own culture. And we have to know that our own culture impacts upon our experiences. It will impact upon even the very language that we use. It will impact upon, absolutely, there's nothing that it doesn't impact upon. So it therefore means that there's always going to be a dose of us with what we give to our clients. And that I mean, I think for as long as you can appreciate that, it's you're almost a foot ahead. I mean, the minute you start thinking that, one of the things that we speak about all the time, especially within my area of work, is cultural competence. So it's about being able to be culturally competent, culturally sensitive, culturally appropriate, and all of these things within your area of space. So it's about respecting boundaries, respecting that of the clients, but also knowing that, you're going to give a small part of yourself, with these professional transactions as well.
I think that's really key as well, because like last week we were talking about like assumptions when we met, and the assumptions that people make, and then we were talking about ourselves and the assumptions that we make. And I think that it's a similar point of, it's important to be aware of yourself and aware of where you're coming from, because it's going to impact everything. And I think sometimes when we talk about culture, or when culture's talked about, it's always seen as, it's Black, ethnic minority people who have a culture, but everyone has a culture. And if you don't really think about it, if you're not aware of it, then you're being a bit oblivious to the impact and the assumptions and all sorts of things that you're making in that interaction, positive and negative, without realizing. So it's a really important point to, know that about yourself, understand the impact that you could be having, and also having that cultural competence, and as they say as well, that cultural humility as well. So it's been talked about a lot, where you don't think that your culture's better than everybody else's, but you're open to learning and not thinking that you know everything or you represent everything, because it's kind of like, obviously I'm of Ghanaian descent, but I cannot speak for all Ghanaians, because my one is so complicated. I'm not, I lived here, born here, lived in Ghana, came, all sorts of stuff. So it's not that clear cut. And even if I was in Ghana, and it would still be really complicated. So it's important for me to understand that about myself and really see that I'm seeing people through a specific lens. And if it was somebody else, they'll see them with another lens as well. So
Definitely.
I think sometimes, I mean, that to be able to be able to deviate from that line of sight and from that perspective is challenging, because you only have and you can only afford your own perspective. You don't know what you don't know. And it's really difficult to sometimes be able to, what I'm trying to say is it takes an awful lot of insight and self-awareness, and what's the word I'm looking for? Self-awareness, but emotional intelligence as well, to be able to say, I don't know, and I can't perhaps see things from your perspective, and perhaps I'm deficient in that area. I can't appreciate other cultures. I can't appreciate that you're from, you're from Uganda, I'm from Uganda. The fact that we both are not exactly the same and do not like all of our traditional foods and do not even speak. This takes emotional intelligence, and sometimes for one reason or another, we become a bit deficient in that area. But again, if the insight and the correct exposure, you come to realize exactly that people are absolutely different. Sometimes there's more differences between within races than between them. Look how look, I don't know how many nations are represented just on this screen, and yet we're all black. But then to someone else, to someone Caucasian, all they can see is black. You're black.
Very true. I think, Anna, you touched on this last time we met, isn't it, about how people come up to you and talk about, maybe I think like a lady talking about her friend who's Congolese or something like that, and you're like, that's great, but I know nothing about Congo. Why are you talking to me about this? It is really interesting. I think where you came in, Michelle, was a good place, because obviously you could then follow through the conversation. But like I was chatting with the girls because I was like, oh, this would be a good question to follow up from that, because yes, you are right in terms of our culture. Like we only see things from our perspective, or can really only truly appreciate things from our perspective. We can try, we can't, like you said, like be a bit, like at least learn to be culturally competent in terms of both us, and have appreciation for other people's culture, but we can't fully understand it, and that's fine. There's no point trying to what's the right way to phrase it? There's no point trying to overdo what we should be doing, if that makes sense. Just have an appreciation for it. Be aware of the cultural differences as much as possible. But I think what I was also asking was that when you say that there is a huge disproportion of children of Black descent within the care system, that I also wondered if there was consideration giving for, and I'm not trying to make excuses, I was just interested to know really, in terms of if there was any consideration giving for maybe their cultural backgrounds, environmental impact, and all of that. You know how people can behave the same way on the surface, but what's pushing them underneath is very, very different. Absolutely. And is there consideration giving for all of those things that may likely impact a Black child differently from how it might impact a child of Caucasian descent or anything like that?
I think a lot of the time this depends upon perspective, and that will depend upon the clinician. Sometimes it depends on who the social worker is. Sometimes it might depend on who the nurse is that they encounter, the doctor is that they encounter. I think across the board, within the system, in quotes, within the local authority system, there's not one rule for Europeans and one rule for people indigenous to Africa or the Caribbean. It just doesn't work like that. I think when you certainly look at children at the core, children want the same things. Children want to be responded to. Children want to be loved. They want to thrive. They want to reach their own potential that is unique to them, without the threat of violence, without the threat of abuse, emotional, contextual, all of these things. And it doesn't matter what tectonic plate they were born on. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't matter where they were born on earth. These are core, these are what children, these are reasonable assumptions. When we go to core groups or we go to child protection conferences, and, sometimes we say, oh, a child is too young. Okay, we won't examine the child's wishes and feelings. They're too young. Well, no, it's a reasonable assumption to assume that this child, wants to grow, to thrive, to achieve their milestones, just like other children. I think sometimes we do ourselves a disservice by trying to make different parameters because we have different understanding. What I use, the knowledge that I have as a Caribbean woman, I will use that to the advantage of the Caribbean children that I see. If I know that a mother, if something is perhaps, you know, let's say a cultural practice, let's have a conversation. Let me tell you what the deal is. It is that in this country here, we do not do this. And, you know, it's me being brave enough to say, let's talk about this now, because otherwise this will be the trajectory. You will go down to a place where you'll have social workers involved, etc., etc. Of course, abuse is abuse, and it has to be reported, and we have to out it. I don't care where you're from. If you're abusing your children, you're absolutely wrong. But where we can see that there's issues perhaps within a parenting context, and you can see that parents require support, or parents require, you know, the Bible says, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. You know, your mind has to be renewed before you can do any better. So these are the things that we need to unpack with parents sometimes. And these are the things that I take to work. The very, you know, you as a parent, you try to do your best to discipline your child. But on the other hand, what is discipline? That's relative. The way you were disciplined as a child perhaps may not be of the law in this country. If you put your hands on your child, you will wake up in prison. This is what happens. So where's the support for that parent, perhaps, whom grew up with physical chastisement? And actually, where they grew up, it wasn't called physical chastisement. It wasn't called physical abuse. It was just called, you know, your parents correcting you. Where's the support for that parent? It's really, you know, it's these various challenges that we have, but nevertheless, you know, we use our own context or in our own cultural, you know, context to be able to influence these families.
Yeah.
And I think you've spoken a lot about the influence that you will have, you can have on the families through your knowledge of the culture and being able to support the parents through those different stages. How is that with people who aren't necessarily from the culture? You know, have you found that that a lot of people are open to learning about that? Do you find that there's a bit of resistance towards it?
So is that resistance amongst parents or resistance about professionals? Because there's two angles there.
Well, yeah, I was more thinking resistance amongst colleagues.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
because
absolutely.
I mean, we've said it even amongst ourselves in previous conversations, how sometimes it feels like therapists might have a mindset of, you know, actually, no, this is the right way. A child needs to be taught how to communicate. This is, you know, this is the only way it can be done, because this is part of the culture that we're living in and the way that culture says it has to be done, this culture. But actually, from someone else's culture, you know, how is there a way that we can meet them somewhere, like as a middle ground? So yeah,
my hope is that working, especially within 2021, as a, you know, a practicing clinician, you know, across the board, whether it's public, you know, service or even corporately, you know, I hope that my hope would be is that your level of cultural competence would be such that you're able to identify not just cultures but subcultures as well. Understanding that children can be born and live and grow within a specific place, but then still perhaps have ideals, values and constructs that are linked to a place that they've never visited. My children are half West Indian, half African. You know, it means that as much as they were born in London, have grown and lived in London, their values, because of our culture, the strength of our culture and what we deposited in them, are that of children perhaps, you know, in quotes, back home. You know what I mean? So it would be that if we were to have any sort of service intervention, or there would be services working alongside us, I would want the person working alongside us to be able to appreciate that. Well, actually, no. You know, if I tell my child you know, my 12-year-old, my 15-year-old, that actually 7 o'clock is the time that they go to their room. You have an hour of quiet time before bed. I don't expect any arguing. I don't expect a social worker to come and tell me, well, actually, it's their civil liberty. It's their civil liberty, but surely this is a small example, and it's not by any means trying to say that, you know, people born here wouldn't have that value. It's merely saying that, you know, they're unborn. And I think this knowledge comes from being able to identify, like I said, subcultures within cultures, understanding that, you know, people subscribe to ideals, morals, constructs, and, you know, these systems. Often where they get them from, it's from growing, it's from exposure. It's the fact that, you know, my son, if you say to him, you know, oh, what's your favorite food? Rice. He likes rice. Most 4-year-olds, you know, they don't eat anything but pasta. When I speak to the you know, the how do you get him to eat so well? Because we cook everything. This is why. Do you know what I mean? Our home is a hybrid. We call it a hybrid fusion of African and Caribbean isms. So we cook absolutely everything. So when he goes to nursery, he eat absolutely everything. People say to me, oh, but when, you know, before, you know, was he pre-lockdown? Oh, you know, if Kimi went, and my daughter, if she went and had like a play date at another child's house, oh my gosh, you know, she washed her plate after she ate. I said,
well done.
Yep.
I said, of course, who should wash her plate? Of course, you know, she ate from the plate. Of course she should, you know. It's the same. If we're eating, we eat with our hands. Do I expect someone to come to my house and scrutinize me or make a judgment because our choice of utensil was our hands and not cutlery? Again, it comes from competence.
Yeah, definitely. Sorry, Michelle. I think that's why I was going with that question initially, and I'm thankful that you kind of clarify things in terms of what's expected. So even in this culture, nobody expects any child to be abusing their children, if that makes sense. And that's not what I was going for, but I was leaning more towards subtle differences. Does that make sense? In certain cultures,
absolutely,
and researchers found this, that in certain cultures, I was reading a piece of research about bilingualism yesterday, and was saying that researchers found that in certain cultures, for example, silence is a thing that, like, children are sometimes expected to be seen and not heard, and that's not necessarily abuse, if that makes sense. It's just that it's a difference. So these children will talk in other places, and sometimes and it was very specific to the fact that silence is expected, especially when they have guests over, and also especially, say, for example, when there was someone of a higher social standing, for example, in their presence. And that's not necessarily abuse, if that makes sense. It's just the difference. So that's what I was leaning more towards, that if, for example, if a social worker went to a house and this child just sat there really quiet, depending on the social competence or the cultural competence, for example, they might think, oh, wow, that's a bit odd, if that makes sense. But whereas for someone else who has a bit more understanding in terms of differences in culture, they might think, well, maybe it's this and maybe it's that. I'm not saying that we should then like over generalize everything, but at least have a balanced view of what it could be, if that makes sense, rather than just, oh, wow, this is really odd.
Exactly like you said, but it's about having that 360 perspective. So appreciating what it could be, what it might not be, but then being still able to offer different perspectives. Exactly. And sometimes, I mean, I know in my head, and I certainly would hope, I have an ideal, certainly for people going into homes and, you know, people that have the job of making very difficult decisions concerning, you know, the welfare and the ultimate outcome of children. But unfortunately, and, you know, I hope I don't have regret saying it, unfortunately, I think there's not enough of us that have that balance and are able actually to, you know, to be able to do exactly like you said, be able to articulate that actually, you know, from my knowledge of this family, from the region actually that they're from, you know, my being a visitor, actually, it's usual that they would avoid eye contact because they don't know me. You know, it's, you know, it would be seen as offensive if they don't know. No, I haven't looked into records in the last 5 years that have had offered any other perspective other than one. The multi-dimensional view, unfortunately, is not one I encounter often. And that's a shame.
Yeah, I was about to say that. It's a bit sad. Yeah,
it is a shame. Yeah, so obviously, Michelle, you've you know, you've got this really important role right now. I know that it's semi-new for you, but obviously there was a whole journey before you got there. And one thing you were saying earlier is that, you know, like a lot of the children, you know, they could be your child, or that you see yourself in them, that sort of thing. So what we wanted to ask now is, you know, can you tell us a bit about your journey from, you know, the beginning, wherever you want the beginning to be, to now? Like, how did you get here? Because I think sometimes, how did you get to where you are now? Because I think sometimes for some people, they will see you at this place that you're at, and they'll really find it hard to see how they can get there themselves and what they could do, or they think that you're very different from them. So yeah, just an overview of your journey from start to now.
I think journeys generally can be better appreciated in retrospect. So it's by looking back and being able to say, oh, okay, oh, that bump was, you know, so offer me for a moment just the opportunity to go back rather than journey forward. So I'm here as a children safeguarding advisor, and for me it's just been a few months, but it was a natural progression from working as a health visitor that I've done for, you know, many years. And it's a job that I've become. I felt as though, because of the levels and the different challenges and stuff that I was you know, having to handle day in, day out, it was a really natural progression into safeguarding. So to be able to sit here, it just felt like for the last few years anyway, because of the, you know, abuse rates going up, domestic violence going up, the toxic trios, stuff like this going up all the time. It felt like I was only doing safeguarding anyway. I said, you know, for me, it's better I perhaps go and sit on the seat as a children's safeguarding advisor, or at least have the resources that I need to be able to safeguard these children. Because as a health visitor, I felt ill-equipped. I felt that I didn't have it. You know, before health visiting, of course, I had to go to university to do my specialist degree. I said that I wouldn't go back to university again. So, but of course, we always say, isn't it, the first time you go, oh, I'm never doing this again. And then, of course, it's never quite that straightforward. Of course, we believe in lifelong learning. Before health visiting, I worked for a trust as a staff nurse, a community staff nurse, and I took the year to really sit and watch, and actually took a demotion for a year where I said, okay, let me stop and see if health visiting is something that I want to do. So, I mean, that was, you know, our family sort of had to decide on that, because any sort of job that changes for the family, we all have to be in agreement with, you know. So it was my husband and myself at the time, and my daughter was quite small, knowing as well that I'd have to go to university again for it. Prior to that, I was working in a large, very established A&E department, an urgent care centre in London, where I was a nurse practitioner. And I did that for about 6 or 7 years. Again, that for me was a great job, where it was about diversity and, you know, being able, literally, you know, working in A&E. Any person that works in A&E will tell you that the minute you turn up on your shift, you just don't know what is going to go down. And it was one of those things. That was what kept the job palatable at a time when it was so many challenges. I was there at the time of the bombings in London, and, you know, things. It was so difficult. Our hospital put on standby, not just standby, but then being actually receiving these really unwell people, the victims and things. And it was you know, it was something literally different every single day. And I think for myself, it was that probably had me think, okay, so I'd perhaps desire a bit more stability now. So I started to look at more community posts, more family friendly posts, which is, where I went from there. Before then, I did a bit of research in a medical foundation, and looking at allergies, emergency care, emergency medicine, emergency treatments, things like that. I worked for a brief time in a prison as a nurse. I would say that to people, and they say, "Oh my God, so what did you do?" Yeah, I was a nurse. Before then, I trained as a midwife, and before then, it was my nursing training.
Wow.
I've done many jobs. I've done many jobs, and I've always loved diversity in my work. And before I qualified as a nurse, I worked in retail. I worked up, in central London, and I loved the diversity of meeting people every day. It was somebody new, meeting famous people, which was great. But yeah, I've always loved the diversity amongst my work. And I think, within even my practice now, I try always to keep my role as diverse as possible. Sometimes the diversity is me. If the job becomes a bit monotone, for want of better words, the diversity is me and what I bring to it.
That's great.
Wow.
I really like that.
So Michelle, what were your biggest challenges then, and how did you go about facing them?
I think sometimes, if we're honest, sometimes our challenges are very close and not often in the mirror. That person in the mirror, that person that sometimes, if you want in a pity party, they sit down and they cry with you and they tell you, "Oh yeah, it is bad. It is really bad. Yeah, oh my God, it's bad. It's really bad." And before you know it, you're just wallowing. And
Yeah.
I think the challenges that I've had for myself, I've never suffered with, issues with self-esteem. I've never suffered with issues of, not feeling good enough or anything like that. Some of the times sometimes I've left myself vulnerable to perhaps people whom I perhaps looked on as, I don't want to say mentors, but for want of better words, I remember a particular, the first challenge that I had when I was very first newly qualified nurse. And I used to, as newly qualified nurses, we were like little lambs, always running behind like a little, constantly looking like for validation, and constantly looking just to hear that, we'd done the right thing and stuff. And I remember feeling so disappointed by a colleague when she didn't do the right thing, when she had an opportunity to make the right choice and didn't. And that for me, I really felt, I was disappointed, but then I really felt to myself, and I remember literally saying to myself, "Michelle, that's not a reflection of her, it's a reflection of you," because, give people the opportunity to be human. She's allowed in her humanity to be exactly who she needs to be. And actually, when I took a closer look, a lot of the issues in quotes that I felt that I had were because I allowed people to disappoint me, and it was the effect that people had on me that I allowed to get beneath my skin. It's been certainly since I've been a mother that I've taken a completely different perspective on things, and those sorts of challenges I just I can't afford to have anymore. But certainly I feel a lot lighter in the way of challenges. That the challenges that I face now are certainly, I'm more selfish now. I mean, I don't take on from other people. I have my standards, reasonable standards. I think sometimes, again, in humanity, we need to not judge people by our own standards, but the truth is that what other standards are there available to judge people by? The truth is that we expect things from people. If somebody's my manager or my supervisor, I have an expectation of the way that they should be toward me, the way that they should be toward their work. When I've been within a management position, I've had to behave a certain way because I've had people looking to me for advice, looking to me for management, supervision, and, you know, there's an expectation. But certainly, you know, since I became a mother, I'm feeling a lot less challenged by people. So my own challenges are my own personal challenges now. Michelle, what next? What are you going to do next? You know, okay, so you want to get from here to here. How are you going to do that? These are the clear obstacles that are, you know.
So what was it about having children that, I guess, changed your mindset and approach at work when challenges will come? What was it about having children that changed it?
I think in large, there's just a huge part of your brain that is not available anymore. It just goes to availability. I just don't have the time to sit, to worry, to ponder, I just don't have the time that once upon a time I did to lend, because even as we speak now, I can hear my children in the background, and it's just, you know, it's just, I mean, I consider it a privilege to, of course, have them. And, you know, it means that it's another dimension to my life. I don't have the space up here, the space in my brain anymore to lend to things that I just rather not. I only want to spend my time, my energy, you know, energy and time are such valuable resources, even beyond money. So I want to spend my time and my energy on things that make me happy and people that make me happy, and nowhere else. I think I'm allowed to be, I'm going to be 40 in a couple of years. So I'm allowed to be selfish in that.
So have you found, Michelle, like, obviously you're very confident, very, you know, experienced, established. How have you found that people have responded to you in the workplace? Have you had any sort of, what have been the positives, what have been the negatives? You know, how have you found that?
That's a really good question. I've had a conversation very recently with a friend who I said that, you know, it's good to, you know, I believe in self-analysis, and it's important to always look at what you give to people, because there's no one that is in receipt of themselves. There's no one that receives themselves. So as much as you know me and you might perceive, you know, you say, oh, Michelle, she's confident. For someone else, that might be arrogant. And you have to give room for that. You know, if a lot of the time in work, I can be overconfident. The fact that at a meeting she's never been to before, oh, she's only been on the team for a couple of weeks, the expectation perhaps is that I'll say nothing. No, I'm going to say everything, because I've got everything to say. If there's a seat at this table and I've been given one, I will partake in conversation. I'll let you know that I'm here. But then again, that, you know, for you, that is confidence. For someone else, that's quite different. I think for me, one of the things that, again, I'm not going to do is be responsible for your feeling toward me. I can't. I mean, I can only be authentic me. I only know how to be authentic me. So beyond that, you know, I hope that you see and understand that, you know, my energy and my passion is because I'm passionate and energetic. But if you see that as perhaps arrogance, or perhaps, you know, anything else, that's on you. I say all that to say that I'm confident that there's people at work that think that I am arrogant, and I say that confidently. But I'm genuinely not. Do you know, it's taken me so much not to be, again, I've never had issues with self-esteem, but to be sure about the skin that I'm in and genuinely get to a place of comfort. And I'm not going to reduce myself for no. My grandparents did that so I wouldn't have to. Was it Jay-Z? Jay-Z said, I sold crack so you don't have to. You know what I mean? I'm not, absolutely. I'm not, I don't my grandparents reduced themselves. They were quiet when people came into rooms. They didn't sit in the right place. They didn't go into the shops. They didn't go into places knowing that people did not want them there. They did all of that, so I don't have to. So for me now, this is it. This is it.
That is brilliant. And I like that you said that you have no other way but to be authentically you. And that's something that we've been talking about a lot on this platform, isn't it? And like challenging ourselves to be more. So it's actually absolutely great to talk to someone who's absolutely confident in their skin and who they are, and unapologetically so. That's important.
Do you know where it comes from? You know, when I became, and again, it comes back to I'm growing a young Black female, and my daughter, to me, I tell you, it means that when she was born, I had to put a big reset on me, and I had to check myself, because her skin is black, her hair is tough, it doesn't grow straight, it doesn't flow in the wind. It meant that I had to be sure about who I was. Why? Because this girl growing up would see me, and if she can see right through me. If she sees any part of me that's not sure, she won't be sure about herself. And you know, we all grow up with issues and schisms and stuff just from childhood. And oh my God, why was my mum like that? Why was my dad like that? One of the things that she will not have to be debunked from as a young woman is the fact that her mother was not sure about herself. That is, you know, let that be one thing she does not have to deal with. You know, she will not have to deal with that. She needs to know that before she even puts her foot on the ground in the morning, she's a winner and that she's won. And that's exactly the energy that we've run with since the day she was born. She's won. When I, you know, let her go into the gate, when she's going into school, and I say to her, make sure you win today. One of the teachers, you know, laughed. Oh, well, we've got a competition going on. Yeah, she knows I say, she knows. I said to her, make sure you win today. She goes, yeah, Mummy, I will win, because she knows that she will win. Winning is when we talk about between me and her, what is winning? Winning is being exactly you, and not reducing, not powering, not having to, you know, think or second guess or, you know, for the benefit of other people. No. Winning is being exactly what you're made to be, and feeling good about it. You know, so I'm learning from her as much as she's learning from me, and she's only 10.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I love hearing really about all of that.
Yeah,
that's amazing. So obviously you've been in management for a while. Like a few minutes ago, you were talking about being new, going to a meeting, and you know, sometimes there's an expectation for people to be not so vocal when they start. Yeah, can you just tell us a bit more about your experiences of being in management, any sort of things that felt like a glass ceiling, and how you kind of got around there? Because we know that there's a lot. So even if you have, you know, all the confidence, all the skills or whatever, sometimes there's these structural things in the way and glass ceilings in the way, or it might feel like that, especially if you know, for some it might feel like that to some people. So yeah, can you tell us a bit more about just that kind of climb to management and the sort of other things that you had to go around?
I think that it's important to acknowledge that managing people, you first have to be able to manage yourself. I see people going for management positions and I'm thinking, you can't even keep time. So what are you doing? Do you know what I mean? And that's not to take anybody, that's not saying that nobody can't learn, or, you know, timekeeping, or, you know, and being able to host meetings and stuff like that. That's not, you know, that's not to take away from these people. It's to say that, you know, you first have to be able to show that you can self-manage and self-start. That's where it starts. It starts with yourself. And once you can get yourself in check, it means then that you can step into the sphere, or you can step into the arena of interviews knowing that you are the value. So one of the things that I had to realize is that it doesn't matter where. I've been interviewed for positions, senior management positions, and didn't get them. I left the interview feeling that I'd done my absolute best. When they asked me, do you want the feedback? Yeah, I'll take the feedback, because even your negation. You know, you're saying I'm not going to get the position, or I haven't got the position. I'll just use that to my benefit. Absolutely. And I'll take it and I'll make it make me better. You know, I've learned that I am the value. And this is something that, you know, if I could get it on a t-shirt, this is something that I'd run with. I'm the value. It means that within a job, it doesn't matter about the job, how esteemed it is, what the paycheck is, what banding it is, where it is, who you're working alongside. I'm the value. So the fact that I am coming to this job, I'm the one that's bringing the value to this post. If I leave, my value comes with me. And this is, you know, this is the mindset that I've always had. So, you know, if you should choose to allow me an opportunity, and this is perhaps something that I even put on my CV, not my CV, on my closing or my personal statement, I say, I'd love the opportunity to show you exactly all of the above, to demonstrate exactly all of these things that I've, you know, that I've articulated in writing. I'd love that opportunity. But, you know, if you don't give me the opportunity, absolutely no problem. There'll be others. It's absolutely fine. You know, glass ceilings exist. I feel like a lot of the time within positions that I've had, I've only been able to advance beyond previous positions because I was allowed to, you know, and that's, again, that's perhaps that shadow culture that we hear so much about. That's that no one says the rules, but you know, there's told them what's going on here. This is, you know, this atmosphere is a little, you know what I mean? That it's that shadow culture. So, you know, I've realized, you know, that I've only got to this table because I've been allowed to, because I fit, in quotes. I fit. You know, I'm going to be somebody that, you know, if they look, you know, from a bird's eye view, it's going to look really good to have this, you know, this plus sized Black woman with locks and wild glasses at their seminar, or, you know, speaking at their, you know, at their next webinar, or, you know, their away day. I understand and I appreciate that, you know, for lots of people, it's a tick box exercise. However, I think that we need to be able to utilize that to our benefit and to be able to exploit situations, just like perhaps, you know, the situations try to exploit us. A job has to work for you as much as you working for it.
Yeah.
And, you know, this is something that, you know, we have to understand as well. Sometimes you have to take jobs in order to get to the better job. You know, sometimes it's not what you earn, it's what you learn. You know, this is, you know, this is something that, you know, I've had to learn as well. Okay, I may not be here for when I took my demotion for the year, it weren't about the earning, it was about the learning. So, you know, sometimes, you know, establish your system of value. Establish your system of value. What is it that I want to get out of this here? Establish that early on. You know, make your plan. How is that going to happen? Give yourself an exit date. Sometimes you can find yourself working in quite toxic spaces as well, but be able to say, okay, well, do you know what, I'm doing it for this long. Sometimes when you put that date of exit on a job, it makes it so much easier to tolerate. The minute you know that, okay, you're only in it for this long, this date I'm going to start hitting the websites again and having a look at, you know, it just makes it more tolerable. I think it's planning. It's about planning, and it's about, you know, making sure that you put you first as well. One thing that I've learned about working, certainly within management, is that you manage everybody, but then you can always sometimes find yourself a little vulnerable and a little bit in need of, you know, a prop up. But again, this is where it comes from, being able to put yourself first sometimes, and still being a little bit selfish and saying, okay, well, no, this is my need at this time. I know the team has a need, the service has a need, but actually this is my need at this time. And actually, if you don't do that, no one else is going to do it, you know. And sometimes for me, I've had to sidestep jobs and say, actually, my need at this time, as easy as it would be to progress in that area and accomplish this, my need at this time, what my children need, is a mother who's responsive and who's going to be able to pick them up from school. It's harder for females in management than it is.
I was just thinking that.
It's harder.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to contend with.
so much to contend with, so much to contend with. Again, you can't sit in that boardroom and be, as much as you're sat there within your employment capacity, thinking about those contractual obligations, you're thinking about what you're going to cook for dinner. If on your lunch break you could run into Tesco quickly to get a quick shop, you're thinking about, let me put my phone where I can see it, because if school ring or if nursery ring, I need to be able to get that call. It's all of these things, and to any woman that is doing this at the moment and balancing, I know it may not feel like you're accomplishing much, but you're doing amazing things. You're doing phenomenal things. Just, sometimes winning for that day is getting the kids to school. That's enough. That's enough. You don't need to do anything else. Sometimes on my best day, it's because I took my children to school, I picked them up from nursery, got them home and gave them, a meal. My daughter says to me sometimes, is this it? I said, is it hot? She goes, yeah. I said, well, this is it.
Oh gosh. Do you have any sort of take-home message for people who are listening, especially those that are like really at the beginning of their journey, like just starting off at uni or just starting off at their first jobs and all of that stuff?
And there will be so many. I think with this year, unlike any other, people perhaps are suffering from isolation more than they have previously. Once upon a time, you'd have your peer group to keep you going and your study group to be able to, to keep you going and things, if you were in university and stuff. So unlike any other year previous, no doubt people at the very beginning are feeling a little lonely. I've touched on it already today, but the thing I would want people to remember 1,000% is that you're valuable. It doesn't always feel like it. And sometimes, you have to understand that you are in existence for now, for a purpose. There's a saying, if you have a pulse, you have a purpose. It means that if you are alive, there is something that you need to be doing. I've got a friend who every month she's got a new business initiative. And I say, no worries. If that's what you want to do, just that's what you want to do, because she's so constantly trying to do something, trying to achieve something. To people that are, perhaps even struggling with not necessarily the pressures of academia or employment, but perhaps are dealing with the added pressure of mental health baggage. You're valuable. You are valuable. It doesn't always feel like it. When that diamond's in the ground under all of that pressure, it feels terrible. It feels dark. It feels lonely. It feels by itself. But when it's excavated, it's a diamond. You're valuable. And I think, one of the things that perhaps suffers us as young people, I still claim that I'm young, but, is the pressure that we put onto ourselves. We can put a lot of pressure on ourselves. And sometimes we do just need to take it easy, learn to breathe, learn to be, exist in the moment and pursue mindfulness. Depression is thoughts about, things that have happened. Anxiety is thoughts and pretension about stuff that hasn't happened yet. But we need to find that place of balance right in the middle where we can stop ourselves in the now, breathe, smell, the smells around us and just be present in the now. It's challenging, and I'm almost saying it to remind myself, but there is so much value in being alive now. I don't want to constantly be pursuing things to the point of I'm now anxious about anxious about even the challenges and the stuff that I'm putting on myself, or, the self-prosecution of why did you do that? Oh, Michelle, years ago, why did you do that? That was the wrong choice. That was the wrong move. I want to exist in that middle bit, because there's value there. And that's where I am. The the value in that middle bit, I'm not in the future and I'm not in the past. I'm here now. So I'm the value that exists in now. And this is, I think, should be our pursuit.
Like what you said, you are the value. I've never thought about it like that. So I'm gonna actually think about it a bit more. But for me, it's always been a bit of, do you know what, I can actually do this. I'm not gonna let, obviously it took a while, and I have to keep on telling myself this, especially when you go into certain types of workspaces. Sometimes that can bring up all sorts of stuff, but just having that thought of, I can do this, it's not rocket science. There's nothing that they have.
That's the toxicity I was alluding to. Yeah. That's the toxicity that I was alluding to earlier. So those are those really toxic spaces whereby a decision and a judgment has already been made about what you'll achieve, about what your potential, about what your outcomes will be, and about, you know, ultimately what you are, everything that you are, based on what you look like. And that's obviously, we know that it's not right, but you know, it's what it's another issue that we have to deal with.
It is what it is.
Sadly.
It is what it is within the workplace, you know. Training opportunities, advancement opportunities, you know, it's you know, secondment opportunities sometimes, but you know, it's what it is. For me, I don't know that it's to have an attitude of it is what it is. I think for me it's the knowing it exists means that I know. So that for me is the win and the heads up, because as well, I think that what we have to get better at doing is calling it out. The same way like genderism. You know, let's call it out, and let's actually call it out what it is. You know, are you making decisions? You know, what, you know, how have you arrived at this decision? What's your evidence base? You know, we work in evidence-based professions. What is your evidence base that you've made a conclusion about me? Because of what? Where's your evidence? And let's challenge it. And actually, that's what we need to become more active in doing, because what we normally do is, again, we just, you know, we conform to the shadow culture, and we just, you know, have a head down approach. And actually we know, oh no, I won't. After a while, it's no, I won't go for that job because I know I won't get it. And then that's what, you know, that's what happens. And actually, no, what we need to get better is challenging it. And actually, I'm going to apply anyway. And guess what? If I don't, I will take their feedback and I'll say to them, okay, is my interview panel representative of me? You know, let's talk about the issues that are actually, you know, let's talk about the issues here. Not going to sit, you're not going to get me to feel bad, and you know, not feel bad, but you're not going to get an opportunity to speak about what I need to do different. You're going to listen to what you need to do different also.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, you know, let's talk about it. If we can absolutely talk about it, yeah, I'm here for it. I'm here for the conversation.
Well, hopefully, I think more of these things are happening.
Yeah.
But I think in some of the conversations that we've had, I feel like, especially in places like London, or bigger cities, it's been a lot easier. I don't know if easier is the right word, but there's been more momentum. But I think sometimes for some people who are completely isolated, it's that, you know, they may challenge that, but then it has a negative effect on them.
Absolutely.
My thing would be, I'm sorry, move. I just think when it gets to that sort of space, we need to go somewhere else. There's no point that, you know, you have to kind of, it's an assessment, isn't it? It's not just straight away one thing goes wrong. But I think sometimes...
I personally, sorry to interject, I personally do not know how people can work in a place where they're made to feel so in the margin, where they're made to feel so marginalized. Now, if you feel that isolated, the possibility is that you're the only female doing what you're doing. You're the only person of color. You're the only Black person doing what you're doing. Now, if you, like you said, if you find yourself in that situation, and we know that there's power in numbers, especially where challenge is concerned, you need to move.
On today's episode, we spoke with Michelle, a safeguarding advisor. She shared her experiences, her journey, and she did have lots of advice, both for us as well as anyone listening. Let us know your thoughts on this episode. And we would like to say a very big thank you to Michelle, actually, for spending the time with us today. Thank you so much. You can find us at the word #listening on Instagram and Twitter. Until next time, bye.
Bye.